Hi, welcome to another episode where we are talking about the status of the Russia Ukraine war um, and where is the US positioned vis a vis the crisis, particularly the Donald Trump presidency, given the interest that Donald Trump had or continues to have in resolving conflicts all across the world with little avail. Now, if you look at the current status of the Russia-Ukraine war, it's pretty much a conflict that is frozen in time in terms of developments from either side. The skirmishes, the drone attacks continue from both sides. In the latest instance, you had Ukraine attacking Russia in several places with drones. Prior to that, you had a barrage of attacks from Russia in as far as regions and as far as Kiev. So the hostilities continue. The Russians continue to gain incremental gains on the ground and move towards smaller eastern and smaller incremental gains in the eastern part of Ukraine. Um, Donald Trump. So where's the U.S. positioned in all this? The Trump administration, as you remember, has given um, the Russian side a period of 50 days. I think at least a week or 10 days back, which makes it an additional 40 odd days for Russia to accept a ceasefire and come to the negotiating table with Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. In between, a lot of things have happened, of course. That Ukraine, of course, is the weaker party here, so it has lapped up the opportunity given by Donald Trump, which is quite a change of heart given how Donald Trump administration started on started his its posturing on Ukraine, and that culminating in that great Oval Office rift between Zelensky and Trump. From there, Trump has, of course, has had growing frustration with Russia, and therefore has offered 50 days time. I think this 50 days is, of course, a mix of the fact that Donald Trump believes that it is not difficult. It's not a conflict that is easy to resolve. And the second is, of course, that from his conversation with Vladimir Putin, I think there must be a communication from Moscow that they need a certain time period to be able to wrap up, to be able to achieve certain important goals before they come to the negotiating table. That um, in terms of the negotiations itself, nothing has moved much forward. Both sides continue to hold on to positions which is impossible for the other side to concede on the ground. And therefore, in terms of ceasefire negotiation itself, uh, talks itself are not going anywhere from here. So it's again a conflict frozen in time, as I said initially. But there are certain vectors outside the conflict that are changing. One is, of course, how Ukraine positions itself vis-a-vis support its support to Ukraine, and I think a lot of ground there is changing, um, particularly from the fact that Donald Trump seems to have grown frustrated with Moscow and that has caused to give Europeans a little bit of leeway to operate uh, in terms of their support to Ukraine without seeming at odds with Washington. And I think that's a comfortable position for European Union from compared to the beginning. So that has allowed certain countries to buy these equipment from Washington and send it to Ukraine. You saw Germany at the helm of it, particularly the Patriot missiles, promising to buy them and sell it to Ukraine. You have other smaller countries bidding for it. I mean, you have Lithuania in the most recent instance, which is willing to buy some of these defense equipment and pass it on to Ukraine. So I think in terms of the consolidation of Ukraine of European support for Ukraine, it may be a good development for Ukraine itself, but on the ground, I think if Russia um, hardening its position in terms of where it wants to place itself vis-a-vis Donald Trump. The question really is, it's a question of posturing. Of course, you have Vladimir Putin, who's adept at doing this, um, and then you have Donald Trump, who has tried all measures in terms of where it and how it wants to convince Moscow. Now, the important thing to watch out in the next few months will be the one first of which will be the bill that is pending in the U.S. Congress, which is the Mulinar Lindsey Graham bill, which promises, promises as much as 200% secondary tariffs on countries that import energy from India and from Russia, like India and China. I think if Donald Trump were really to sign that bill, then I think that the problems for other countries will grow. But I think it also depends on how these countries actually react and how the prices of crude behave after that. So I think one is if there are secondary sanctions, then the demand for crude will suddenly dry up, which will, of course, take the price of crude to a different level, and it will create certain panic in the global energy market, certainly. The second is, of course, some of these reactions that you're bound to see either from China or India. I mean, you already saw that China blocked rare earth material when Donald Trump had a trade dispute with China, eventually leading up for Donald Trump to slacken his position vis-a-vis China, and the entire U.S.-China trade war actually loosened up a little bit. So I think you will see some of these counter moves from other countries if they're impacted if this bill really comes into play. The second is, of course, countries will also try to move around and circumvent some of these secondary sanctions. The third is how it complicates bilateral relations between India and the US. I mean, that's an important component. India and the US relations have seen crest and trough in the past few months, and Donald Trump's positioning vis-a-vis Pakistan, embrace of Pakistan has, of course, caused certain consternations in New Delhi. And if there is a 200%, or if there is a bill which imposes secondary sanctions on New Delhi for buying oil from Russia, then that could play out in a completely different way vis-a-vis the New Delhi Washington relationship. Let me stop here.